It wasn't
There's a formula to it. A very simple formula.
Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Slash It Podcast. My name is Jared, and if you weren't here for the last one, I don't talk as if I'm some professional, because I'm not. I just talk, because I love scary movies. That's the reason why I talk. So, this episode's about Halloween. I love Halloween. It is one of my favorite horror movies of all time, and one of the first scary movies I ever watched. So yeah, we'll be talking about everything related to Halloween, stuff about John Carpenter, the director of Halloween, like how Halloween changed horror as a whole genre. What is Michael Myers like? Who is he? Who is this man? Or evil, as Dr. Loomis says, which Dr. Loomis, if you don't know, is Michael Myers' doctor friend. Doctor friend? Not Dr. Friend. He tries to shoot him. Dr. Loomis tries to shoot Michael. They're not friends. They're not friends. I can tell you that right now. They're not friends. So yeah, before we get started, I just wanted to let you know, if you want to go follow us on Twitter, it's @slashithorror. Yeah, I talk about scary movies there and random anecdotes that I find interesting. Like the other day, I tweeted about the Halloween 2 soundtrack. It's a banger. The Halloween 2 theme is a banger, and no one can tell me otherwise. I just freaking love that. I don't know. It's like if they just put that behind a rap beat, it would be amazing. They'll never do that, but someone should, because it's amazing and deserves higher recognition. It's like the same level as Friday the 13th Part 3's like disco theme. It's just a banger, okay? So without much further ado, let's jump into this podcast. So, what is Halloween? That's an important question. If you've never seen the movie, you'll probably be very confused at what I'm talking about the rest of this podcast if I don't explain it to you. You probably know some stuff, because it's in the cultural zeitgeist, if you will. But Michael Myers is a killer who, first, he killed his... I'm spoiling the whole movie, by the way. Probably, in this next little section, so it's really not spoilers, because you pretty much just watch people get stabbed. But, in case you didn't want to know what happens in the movie, skip past this part. So, Michael Myers, he's 6 or 5 or 6, somewhere around there. He stabs his sister, and she dies, stabs her, and then he goes to Smith Grove Sanatorium until he breaks out of, when they're transporting him, he breaks out. Yeah, it was a bus crash. And the people who were in charge of letting the criminally insane patients out just in the bus crash. No one cared. They just let them all walk around and everything. You would think there'd be a whole guard team ready for something like this, but nope. It's just Dr. Loomis and the nurse lady. I forget her name. The nurse lady. They're the only people who even know what's going on. I don't know how that's possible, but you would think you would know an entire bus full of patients are completely missing from your sanatorium, but who knows? I don't get it. Anyways, so Michael Myers then escapes, and he goes into the town of Haddonfield. Dr. Loomis knows that he's going into Haddonfield. He kills a garage worker. That's how he gets his garage jumpsuit thing. He then goes and stabs Laurie Strode and her friends and family. Not her family, her friends. Mostly just her friends, her babysitting friends. And at the end of the movie, Dr. Loomis ends up shooting him, Michael Myers, and he, spoiler alert, doesn't die. And it's kind of a cool ending for a movie that came out in 1978, because that's not really something that ever happened back then. You didn't really have a character who just didn't die like that. And that's why we got, what is it now, 12? It's 12 Friday the 13th sequels, which is going to be funny, because if there isn't a Friday the 13th movie made in the next 2 years, 3 years, Halloween Ends, I think is the name of the movie. The next one after Halloween Kills. Halloween will have 13 movies in it, in the whole franchise. And Friday the 13th will have 12. And that really annoys me for some reason. Why is there only 12 Friday the 13th movies? And there's going to be 13 Halloween movies. I don't really get that. It annoys me for no reason. But that's just something that I'm really, angry about for some reason. Just make another one. Please. Just stop with the lawsuits and make another one. Please make another one. It's not that hard. Please, just write something so that way you have 13 movies before Halloween does. All I want. So we're going to talk about how Halloween relates to the current climate in horror movies. I think I'm going to talk about a little mixture of two different things in this section here. How Halloween relates to the current climate means you have to understand how it changed scary movies as a whole. Because before this, so slasher movies, which I'm going to have a whole entire podcast about, that's a whole different thing though. I'll go a little bit into it. So slasher movies started pretty much with Psycho. You can kind of pinpoint it back to Psycho. It's the beginning of the modern day slasher film. And after Psycho, we get Halloween. And, well, years later. But it's just a natural progression of Psycho. But from Halloween blew it up. I mean, it was an independent film. It made the most money. I think technically, the 1999 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie is technically independent, and that made way more money. But it was also by Nickelodeon or something. There was some weird. It was independent technically, but it was by a company that ran under a different name or something. I forget how that all worked. But at least for the longest time, Halloween was the largest grossing independent film of all time. And that's kind of what sparked these 70 slasher different, 80, 90, 200,000 slasher films that we now see everywhere no matter what. If you wanted to write a scary movie, you just make a slasher film. It's really not that complicated. Because slasher films are kind of generally, they're easy to make, hard to make good. Let's put it that way. The whole idea, hey, I'm making a slasher movie, I'm going to have my villain wear a mask and stab people, that's pretty easy to do. But you can also do it better by not making it so apparent that you're just copying everything else. If you make a slasher movie for example, Texas Chainsaw, even though that came out, I think, before... Yeah, that came out before Halloween did, but it's a good example. Texas Chainsaw, it's more I wouldn't even say it's really that gruesome. Texas Chainsaw gets an unfair rep, I guess, about being this disgusting thing. Some of the later movies kind of are, a little bit, but it's nothing, it's not Human Centipede. It's not Human Centipede. This movie's not Human Centipede. It's not, disgusting and creepy and, disgusting. It's pretty straightforward. It's not super graphic. It's not, terrible. In fact, some of the worst scenes in that movie come before we even meet our villains. Because at the beginning of the movie, there's skeletons that are being dug up from, bodies that are being dug up from grave sites, which we then realize is from our villains. There's scenes of skeletons, and that's some of the most disgusting parts. I guess there's meat and stuff hanging, and I guess we're supposed to think it's men, body parts or whatever, but just arms and legs and whatever. But the skeletons are honestly the most gruesome part of that entire movie. So we see that Texas Chainsaw Massacre came out before Halloween, and it was different. But then Halloween came out and did what it was doing. And they did it for really not a lot of money. And they grossed a lot of money. So then we have Friday the 13th come out. And Friday the 13th and Halloween coming out within, I think it was 2 years of each other? Or a year? It was a year or two. Because it was 78 and I think 80? I think it was 78 and 80. Halloween 78 and Friday the 13th 80. And the idea that we got those movies back and forth so quickly. And then, through the entire 80s, we got a Friday the 13th movie every year except for, I think there was 3 years in the 80s that we didn't get a Friday the 13th movie. So, we got all of these movies so quickly. And then we got all of the Halloween movies. In the 80s, I think there was 5 of them? Or 6? I guess it'd be either 4 or 5, because you don't count the first one, because that was 78. But we got a lot of Halloween sequels. And then we were getting Friday the 13th sequels, and then Nightmare on Elm Street. But I'm not going to include Nightmare on Elm Street, because that's kind of, not right now in this discussion, because it's a little different than Halloween and, like, Friday the 13th, where it's a little bit more straightforward murders and not less, like, dream stuff. I do want to talk about Nightmare on Elm Street at some point. The first Halloween movie changed horror movies because we got this sense of, it was the first time that we saw a masked murderer who didn't have a personality, or like, it wasn't like a big twist. He was just murdering people because he wanted to murder people. And I think that's like really, really important to how the horror genre went forward at that point. Because we got this masked murderer who does not show emotion. It's like a childlike curiosity kind of about murdering, and I don't think we got that before this point. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it was a little bit more like, oh, this is for food, they're doing this because of food and for family, you know? But in Halloween, it was just some guy who was just born evil, quote unquote, who murdered just a bunch of people because he just wanted to. Like, there was no real reason for him to do that. So then we get, like, My Bloody Valentine, again, Friday the 13th, all of those sequels. We get Nightmare on Elm Street spawning from this movie. We get Scream. We get Sleepaway Camp. We get, every slasher movie after Halloween that it, like, owes its creation to Halloween in some aspect or the other. And it really did transform the horror genre even beyond just the slasher genre, because it made the horror genre a financially acceptable, like, genre. Because before this point, you had some, like, you had Alfred Hitchcock and, the gothic horror, like the 30s, 20s, 30s, 40s horror, and, like, the Blob from, like, the 50s. But it was a different kind. It was a, crap your pants scary, not a, hey, look, there's a giant blob taking over the entire town and is going to put it in a little bubble. Like, that's scary, don't get me wrong, but it's a pre-Halloween and after Halloween. It's like Jaws. Jaws is a whole, I'm going to talk about Jaws in a different podcast because I could talk about Jaws forever. Like, I'm talking about this one segment for Halloween for the last, 14 minutes. Halloween is incredibly important to the horror genre as a whole, because we need to understand that without Halloween, we wouldn't have any or most of the horror movies that we now consider to be cult classics. Well, I'm just going to move on to this important question for many people, because a lot of people are very into the kills in these movies. What are the kills like in the original Halloween? The original Halloween has the more straightforward kills. The more, I'm stabbing you, you died, that's it. Some of them, there's still some really classic scenes. Like, so I'm going to say probably a few of them, not all of them, because I want you to be able to experience some stuff if you haven't seen it yet. So there's the scene where this couple is engaging in activities. He goes, the man, Bob, I think his name's Bob. Yeah, his name's Bob. I love that. His name's just Bob. I don't think he has a last name. He might, but I just want to call him Bob. So he goes back and to get beer out of I think it's the fridge downstairs. In the Halloween remake with Rob Zombie, it's beer's in the van, so I always get confused. But he goes downstairs to the fridge, and Michael Myers is down there, and he sticks a like butcher's knife, like a kitchen butcher's knife thing, straight into him, and then pins him up against the wall, like through his body into the wall. And that's when we get the first Michael Myers like head tilt. You know, his famous confusion, head look, curiosity thing. I have one nitpick about this, that I'm not the only person who's ever nitpicked this. How does a butcher's knife have the strength to go through a wall, through someone, through a wall, and then pin them up against the wall? It's one knife. If he did it, like, stabbed him, like, 4 times, it's different. Like the arms and then, like, the middle of the stomach, that's different. That makes sense a little bit more. But how one knife just pinned him up against the wall, I'll never understand. Doesn't mean it doesn't look cool. Don't get me wrong, it looks really cool. But I don't understand how that happened. And then the next kill we get is with Bob. Well, it's with Michael pretending to be Bob. So Michael puts on a sheet and Bob's glasses, and then goes to the back into the bedroom, and we get the scene where Michael Myers is standing there in the doorway with a sheet over over his face with Bob's glasses on it, and he proceeds to just stand there and not say a word, and she like talks to him or whatever, and she just gets up and he just like stabs her, I think, or chokes. I think he chokes her. I know he chokes her in the remake again, but in the original I forget, I think it's stabbing. Either way, I just remember that her body is laid out with Judith Meyer's gravestone on top of her body, and that is one of the freakiest scenes to me. It's really, really creepy and well done. What is the killer like is an important question. Who is Michael Myers? Why does he act the way he does? Michael Myers is a innovative person. He decides he doesn't really show emotion when it comes to killing. He is a stone cold killer. He has the mask on that you can't tell his face, which, if you don't know, is a William Shatner mask with the holes covered out and black and white painted on his face. I think it's really, really creepy, but really cool, because if you wanted to make a horror movie, you just go to the, Halloween store, and you just change it a little bit, and you're good. He's a stone cold killer. He was a kid who murdered someone. I know I said that already, but Dr. Loomis, which is one of the main characters in this movie, considers Michael Myers to be evil. He is the evil in the world. He's also called the Shape. His name is The Shape in the credits, which I think is a really, really cool nickname. But Michael Myers is, if Psycho is the opposite of Halloween in terms of the main killer. Let's put it that way. Norman Bates has such an incredible personality and like understanding of the world that he like works in, and you can understand why he does what he does. I mean, not really. You don't understand it, but you can listen to it and understand like his ideas. But with Michael Myers, there is none of that. Like, we don't get the normal ability to listen to him. We don't get to understand his ability to kill, like why he does what he does. And I think that's what makes Michael Myers so terrifying compared to other killers in like the genre before this point. And I think that's why it made so much money. It's because we didn't get to have a killer who didn't really care or have a personality. Texas Chainsaw with Leatherface, he did have a personality. So yeah, I'm gonna move on to what is the main characters like. So I'm gonna talk about Laurie Strode, Dr. Loomis, and then I'll talk about some of the side characters a little bit. So Laurie Strode she's probably, I don't know if it says specifically, but anywhere between a like sophomore in high school and a senior in high school, somewhere between there. Probably, no, I guess it'd be probably around like junior, senior-ish. And she's kind of uptight a little bit, more like, kind of more like held back a little bit. And held back, I mean like preserved. That's the word, preserved. And she doesn't care about like her looks and like the way she doesn't try to fit in with everyone else. She's just herself. She's very well put together. She's very strong. She's a very strong female character in horror, which we get that sometimes, but also during like the early Friday the 13th movies, before the one where, what's her name? The girl with the psychic powers in some of the later sequels. Before her in like Alien with, crap, I'm gonna forget her name. Ripley Scott, I think is her name. We didn't really have a strong, defining characters in horror movies, but in this genre, we find that the women are oftentimes the people who actually end up surviving most of the time. They're always the final girl, as you know. And as you probably know, if you're listening to this, you probably know at this point. But with the subgenre of horror, the slasher film, we get a lot of female survivors. And the males are often the ones who are stabbed and murdered and thrown off a cliff or whatever. And Laurie Strode is no different. She is the original, really the original final girl. Like, we get her becoming an important aspect of the rest of horror because she is the original final girl. And I mean, most of this movie is where the stereotypes for the final girl, like in Scream, how he says, like, these are the rules for surviving a horror movie. Like, you don't drink, you don't, have relations, you don't, smoke marijuana. You don't do this stuff. If you do any of this stuff, you get in trouble. And you get in trouble by dying. But, all of those subgenres, I guess, smoking marijuana isn't a problem because she does do it in one scene. But if you do it, like, obsessively, if you drink, if you do these bad things, you will die. That's kind of mostly what happens, at least, especially later on in Friday the 13th, for example. If you do any of those kind of things, you do die. But in Halloween, it's having relations and drinking alcohol. You die. So now we'll talk about Dr. Loomis. Dr. Loomis is kind of crazy a little bit in this movie. He is very, very trying to murder. Murder is a hard word, but he's trying to find Michael Myers for some reason that we don't really understand completely. Like, we get it because he is literally killing people, but he doesn't seem like he knows. Dr. Loomis doesn't have it all together, it feels like, in this movie. He's really crazy. He has a gun that he just, like, waves around just randomly sometimes. It's kind of creepy. It's really, really weird, but it's true. It's how it works. I don't get it. I've never understood Dr. Loomis, especially in the second one, when, yeah, I'm not going to talk about that until we get there, because Dr. Loomis gets even more crazy in the second movie. But Dr. Loomis is really cool. If Donald Pleasance was not Dr. Loomis, Halloween would not have been the same movie, I don't think. Without Donald Pleasance's, like, acting, we would not have gotten such an important character done the way it was, and it would probably not have gone the direction that Halloween did later on in the movies and stuff. Side characters are kind of stereotypical. I can't remember all of their names right now, but we have her babysitting friends. Most of them are just like, teenagers, and they all die. Pretty much every one of them dies, I think. Yeah, I don't think there's any of them that survive, other than the two kids that Laurie Strode is babysitting. Everyone else that we know dies, which is not completely normal for 1978. So I'm gonna move forward one more point. What is the ending like of Halloween? The ending of Halloween, if I was watching it back in 1978, it would have freaked me out. So I'm going to spoil it a little bit here, because, I kind of have to. Michael Myers, he gets some hits on Laurie Strode, but then Dr. Loomis runs into the house, runs up the stairs, and shoots Michael Myers off the balcony. Like, he shoots him, and he, stumbles back and falls off the balcony, and he ends up, laying on the He lays on the ground when we cut to him laying on the ground. Dr. Loomis, or Lord Strode, I should say, asks Dr. Loomis if that was the boogeyman. And he goes, I think it's something like, yeah, I do believe it was. And that's when we cut back to Dr. Loomis's face, and he's looking outside. And then we cut back, and Michael Myers' body isn't there, laying on the grass anymore. And then we hear the iconic Halloween theme swelling, and then the credits play. That would have been, if I could go back in time to watch any movie, it would be any horror movie, it would be The Shining and Halloween. Those are two movies that I would want to see audience reactions to. This is incredibly interesting, this next part. So John Carpenter is the director of Halloween. He created Halloween and Halloween 2. He wrote Halloween 2. He didn't direct Halloween 2. He directed the original. Rick Rosenthal directed Halloween 2. Which is not bad directing. It's really not. It's just a different movie. It feels a little different, and it's hard to make a different director make the same feeling movie as the original one. It's supposed to be like the same day. It's kind of complicated a little bit. But John Carpenter, after this movie, he went on to he wrote Halloween 2. He then remade The Thing from Another World, which, The Thing, if you don't know anything about that movie or how that's related to Halloween, so they're watching a scary movie on a TV, and the scary movie on the TV is The Thing from Another World. He loved that movie, and he always wanted to remake it, and eventually he did, and he made The Thing, and which released to a not fun release. It did not do very well when it was released, because it came out with, I think it was like E.T., Karate Kid, and Gremlins were all like around the same time. So then The Thing just kind of got like pushed away a little bit in like terms of like box office. And then he released it again a year later. It did a lot better, but it still didn't do good. And then now it's gained its cultural relevance, I guess. So he made that movie, and that movie got him, I think he did Escape from L.A. or Escape from New York came after. He wrote that one, and he did pretty good that one. Then he made the sequel, Escape from L.A., which, by the way, if you didn't know, I didn't know this either until I was like looking at this stuff. Escape from New York, Escape from New York, and Escape from L.A., there's a character named Snake, and Metal Gear Solid Snake is actually based off of Escape from New York Snake. And I think that's really cool. I don't know why. I just think that's really, really cool. So then John Carpenter, he also, I don't know if you know this, he also is the composer? Yeah, composer. He's the composer for the Halloween theme. The first Halloween and the second Halloween, I think. And then now, in the newer ones, so between Halloween 1 and 2, those are the only movies that he had the direct involvement with until Halloween 2018, when he composed. He was a creative consultant, and I think there's another like co-producer or something like that. And then he composed a whole new score for this movie, and then he's composed a whole new score for Halloween 2 or Halloween Kills, and then now with Halloween Ends, he'll make another, I'm guessing, another version of the Halloween theme, and then co-produce it and everything, be a creative consultant on this movie. So this is the first time we've gotten John Carpenter Halloween movies since the first two. John Carpenter is a staple of direction in the horror genre. I mean, you don't get very many. You get Tobe Hooper for Texas Chainsaw 1 and 2. You get John Carpenter with Halloween 1, 2, and then being a creative consultant on everything. The other Halloween movies. I mean, Wes Craven, they're all together. You bundle John Carpenter in with these great people. So yeah, he really didn't want to make Halloween 2. He wanted to basically make Halloween its own movie. He didn't want a sequel. He wanted it to end the way it did. but he was in a contract with Universal at the time because he wanted to make The Thing, and Universal would make The Thing if he made Halloween 2. So he wrote Halloween 2 it was a 6-pack of beer every night, and he wrote it in a week. He wrote Halloween 2 in a week, making like a 6-pack of beer every single night for a week straight. That's how he wrote Halloween 2, because he really didn't want to make Halloween 2. Yeah, so that's going to be the end of this podcast. I enjoyed talking about Halloween. I love Halloween. I'm shorting this one down a little bit. I may eventually come back to this podcast and go a little bit more in depth with Halloween and its entirety and its backstory and the story it specifically tries to tell, and a little bit more in depth, for example. But for now, I really did enjoy talking about this. So yeah, you can follow me on Twitter @slashithorror. Instagram is @slashithorror2, I think, and Twitch. If you want to follow me on Twitch, I haven't streamed anything yet on Twitch, but it's @slashithorror2. Check out our website. We post stuff there all the time. Yeah, so come back if you enjoyed this podcast and listening to it, because I did enjoy talking about horror movies. I can sit down. I literally just sat down and started talking about horror movies. I could do this forever. So I hope you guys enjoy. I'm going to say what I say in every video that I've ever made on this Slash It channel. Remember, treat every day like it's